everyone, it's 4 o'clock in the East. Could Donald Trump's smears against veterans and service members, calling those who serve losers and suckers, represent a political Waterloo for him? Well, he certainly seems to think so. Trump has spent the last 5 days fussing and moaning and protesting the reporting from The Atlantic, which now has been matched by nearly a half a dozen news organizations, including Fox News. Despite a weekend spent attacking four-star General John Kelly, as well as Steve Jobs' widow, who's financially linked to The Atlantic, attacks that culminated in a stunning broadside assault on the current leadership of the Pentagon. Trump seems truly, madly, deeply freaked out by the revelation that he essentially disdains the men and women of the military he leads as the country's commander-in-chief. Here's Trump's attack on military leaders, in which he seems to suggest that they've been corrupted by bomb makers and plane makers.
I'm not saying the military is in love with me. The soldiers are. The top people in the Pentagon probably aren't, because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy. And I said, that's good. Let's bring our soldiers back home. Some people don't like to come home. Some people like to continue to spend money.
Joe Biden, whose son Beau served and who was a close personal friend of John McCain, who is singled out in that Atlantic reporting as the object of even more hatred and disrespect from Donald Trump than has been previously reported, has forcefully sought to step into the leadership void created by a commander-in-chief whose true feelings about the military include derision and a total inability to comprehend serving a cause larger than one's financial gain.
None of the veterans you know were losers or suckers. No president has ever talked about our servicemen and women in that way. And I'm sorry if I'm cutting close to losing my temper, but the simple truth is, if that's how you talk about our veterans, you have no business being president of the United States of America.
A former senior Pentagon official tells me, quote, the problem Trump will have with the military isn't just that he said those things, it's that he thinks them. The president's meltdown in the wake of the criticism was laid bare on his Twitter feed today, which reads like someone hacked him and just held down a finger on the retweet key. The attacks are unfocused and dizzying and include attacks against Black Lives Matter protesters, attacks on Big Ten football games and teams, attacks on Joe Biden's ground game, his former fixer Michael Cohen, New York City's mayor, and the governor of the state of New York. Oh, and Twitter itself, the platform. All that while Trump is at the moment behind in national polls and in several key swing states. And reports confirm that he's losing big time in the money game. Today's state of the race, as Trump doubles down on attacking our country's military leaders, is where we start. Veterans advocate Paul Rieckhoff is here. He's host of the podcast Angry Americans and the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, plus former chief of staff at the CIA and the Department of Defense. Our friend Jeremy Bash is back, and professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University and a contributor for the Griot, Jason Johnson, is here. Paul, let me start with you. I follow you on Twitter, so I've seen some of your reaction, but the president, as he often does, is still making this worse by continuing to launch new attacks, this time against the leadership of the Pentagon. How does all this land for you?
Terribly. Most terribly for the national security of our country. Because we're at a point now, Nicole, where the commander-in-chief is attacking his own military out in the open. And everyone in the world can see it. Our enemies can see it, and our enemies are celebrating. Our military is being ripped in half. Our leadership is being politicized. So this is a new low. We wonder if it can get lower. It can always get lower with Donald Trump, but this is definitely a devastatingly low point. And I think it reveals something really important about Donald Trump that military people appreciate especially. He is terribly undisciplined. He can't control himself. He does make everything worse. He's like a political suicide. Every time he takes something out, he takes everything out around him. So he takes out the military, the post office, retired flag grades. It just goes on and on and on. And it blows up everybody else politically along the way. And that's why I think this one hurts for him. It's a populist message when you hurt veterans. It hurts them in swing states. It hurts them with independents like me, with Republicans like you, and everybody in between.
You know, Paul, what about just, again, what we look like around the world? We have a president, an office holder, who, before he was sworn in, described the intelligence community as Nazis, who, while Robert Mueller was investigating the Russian attack on our democracy, constantly called it a coup, who refused to accept intel viewed as credible enough to be placed in his PDB, that the Russians were paying bounties to Taliban fighters for killing Americans. And now a president who, you know, you pull the curtain back just a little bit here, and the Atlantic paints a portrait. The portrait has not been refuted by anybody except the president's known liars.
This is who he is. We've seen this year after year. We saw it in the campaign. People like me who grew up in New York saw it for years. He will attack anything and anybody that's in his way. He has no respect for anything or anyone, to include the FBI and retired generals, Gold Star families, John McCain. I mean, the list goes on and on. It's like a target list of people you should not attack politically. We used to say for years and years, babies, puppies, and vets were like political gold, but they were also radioactive. You don't go after those three groups because it's political suicide. And he does it almost on a daily basis. And maybe this time it's finally caught up with him, and it'll mean the difference in the election.
We have never heard really anybody, just to pull that thread a little harder and really in an uncomfortable way, Paul, we've never heard an American elected official attack any soldiers who were wounded on the battlefield. The last line of the Atlantic reporting has him specifically targeting those who were disfigured from their wounds, amputees. The Atlantic has also reported on the president's particular disdain for missions to retrieve the bodies of people killed in action or to go looking for people missing in action. I don't even know the word for it. Tell me the word for that.
There are no words for it. I mean, disgusting, outrageous, embarrassing. I mean, I think at this point, he's hit every guardrail in our democracy. Maybe the only one that's left is we hope that people like General Kelly, General Mattis, General Dunford, who were in that closed circle that can actually make a difference in these final days, not just for the election, but on our national security. Everybody thinks, you know, can it get worse? Can it get worse? The guy has control of our news. It can get a lot worse. So maybe we can't wait till November. Maybe we can't wait till a new president hopefully is sworn in January. Every day that this guy is in office, our country is weaker and our enemies are celebrating. That's why the stakes are so much higher than politics. The Russians rammed a vehicle into American troops in Syria last week. 4 Americans were wounded by Russian troops. Nobody's even talking about that. These are the kind of things that are happening while he's busy attacking John Kelly, who used to serve in his own administration.
Jeremy Bash, can you pick up that thread? I mean, the list of ways that Donald Trump has improved Russia's national security from the Russian state's perspective and weakened ours is long and growing. But if you add this now robust body of reporting in the Atlantic matched by 6 other news organizations, tell me more about what you're hearing from your sources about what has been revealed.
Well, Nicole, I'm hearing a couple of things. Number one is I've spoken to several former 4- and 3-star generals and admirals, senior defense officials over the weekend, and they have indicated a couple of things. Number one is that with respect to the 2017 visit to France to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of World War I, it was not, as the president said, or the Secret Service was said to have opined, that the weather was preventing the helicopter from going to the cemetery. No, what these officials, in fact, have told me is that the president, in a fit of pique, said he did not want to go to the cemetery. He was incensed, I think, by something that Macron and Merkel had done, presumably upstaging him in the media in Europe. And he said, I'm not going to the cemetery. And so, of course, General Kelly and General Dunford, then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, went to the cemetery in the president's place. So it was the president's decision not to go. Number two is, to a person, every single person I've spoken to over the weekend believes that the quotes are authentic, not because they have heard them, but because they have heard the president say very similar things, and they believe this is the president's deep-seated attitude towards the military. And finally, Nicole, even if you put aside everything that the Atlantic reported, what the president said yesterday, according to these individuals with whom I spoke, what the president said yesterday with respect to the leadership of the Defense Department trying to, I guess the claim is, profit off of service members going to war, that is an outrageous lie. That is an abject misstatement of the attitude, of the approach of senior defense leaders, whether it's a service chief, a combatant commander, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, and the leadership of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, to smear all of those individuals as basically being corrupt and not caring about the men and women they send into harm's way is a smear unlike we've ever seen in American history. It shows just how diametrically opposed Donald Trump is to the Defense Department, to the leadership of our armed forces, and the national security of the United States.
Jeremy Bash, explain what we should read in body language. The Boston Globe published an interview with former Chairman Dunford over the weekend, and he didn't jump into the political fray. He didn't attack Donald Trump, but he said something similar to what I think General Kelly has said in speaking engagements, something John Bolton writes about and has spoken about. And it's about the world order that he believes in. And it's abundantly clear from the comments that his concern is that Donald Trump doesn't believe in that world order, in the post-World War II world order, in our membership in NATO, in keeping our allies close. I mean, how threatened do the military folks that you talk to really feel the world order is by Donald Trump? Jeremy.
Oh, sorry, Nicole. I apologize. Look, the view from national security professionals is that Donald Trump doesn't understand the world. He put out this doctrine of America first, which is really a doctrine of America alone. And most national security professionals believe and understand from their experience that we can't solve the world's problems by ourselves, and that, in fact, we're much stronger, much more capable, much more effective in the world when we have allies and partners. So when the president goes to Europe and picks a fight with our European allies, tries to undermine NATO, cozies up to dictators, he's, again, undermining not just American security, but global security.
Jason Johnson, I am sure that the Trump voters' take on this will be some combination of, fake news or I don't know what it is really, but it's clear that Trump feels very threatened politically by these revelations. And this reporting revealing his private comments about the military is something that upsets Trump. So just using that as my roadmap to the political fallout, not any personal views that not only would a normal politician be disqualified, they'd likely be impeached or be calls to resign. I mean, we're so far from normal, and Trump benefits so much by the fact that we grade him on this curve of saying, oh, his base won't care. Well, let's put that aside and just look at how threatened Trump clearly feels by these revelations. What do you make of his pushback, of him basically saying, it's not that I didn't say these things, I just mean that everybody that runs the Pentagon, which basically runs all active duty and veterans programs, and I mean, that's a whole lot of really important people to a president. They're corrupt, but the rank and file servicemen and women like me, I mean, how's that going to land?
Nicole, it's really interesting to me. This is the classic Trump projection, because the closest that we had to a war profiteer in this administration was Paul Manafort, right? I mean, given the dictators and the violence that he was involved in when he was a part of this administration. So this is Trump finally recognizing, I might have stepped in this. And a lot of times, Nicole, I'll say that, sometimes the things that we discuss, they're for the really politically engaged, and maybe regular voters aren't hearing about it. This hit. I come from a military family. There is nobody in the military who hasn't heard about this story. And Trump is hearing this. I'm hearing this from my students who are in ROTC. I am hearing this from veterans. People are livid about this. And you know that is trickling up to Donald Trump. So this is the one time that I think he's actually afraid of something that he said. And it's as we pointed out before. you can have some dyed-in-the-wool, Kool-Aid drinking Trump supporters who are like, I think this is fake news. But when you add this to what he said about John McCain, which we saw on camera, it's not hard to believe that he has these attitudes. So this is finally a third rail that Trump has hit. Is it going to change anybody's votes? Not necessarily. But is it activating military people who may have said, hey, I don't like either side, to now say, you know what, Joe Biden doesn't insult us and he at least cares about Beau? Yeah, I think that's probably happening on the ground.
And so, to your point, here's what the DNC is hoping to see happen on the ground. Let me show you this ad.
1,800 sacrificed their lives. But when Donald Trump was asked to pay his respects, he said, "Why should I go to that cemetery? It's filled with losers." Surprised? Trump attacked John McCain, tortured for years, as a loser who is not a war hero. Now as president, Trump looked at Arlington Cemetery and asked, I don't get it. What was in it for them? For them, they swore an oath to protect our country. They made the ultimate sacrifice. Donald Trump inherited everything, sacrificed nothing, scoffs at the valor of those who gave it all for America.
Jason.
I mean, this is, that hits. That hits, and I tend to be cynical about this stuff, but that hits. Like there's nobody. It's not just Don McCain. Remember, it was LaDavid Johnson, where he told his widow, well, he knew what he signed up for. This is a president who's never known anything about sacrifice, and it's one thing for him to say, look, I was born on third base and I think I hit a triple. Fine, we have a lot of politicians who may feel that way, but his disdain for people who have served and died serving this country reveals his own cowardice. And the fact that he's intimidated by people who are willing to sacrifice for something beyond themselves for a greater good. And that, I think, is probably one of the most damning elements. I can't wait for the presidential debates because the president will stumble all over this one, and he'll probably get the floor wiped up with him by Joe Biden when it comes to the issue of veterans.
Paul, what are you hearing from veterans that you work with that aren't the sort of voracious consumers of political news? Are they sort of newly awoken by this debate that has suddenly burst into the presidential conversation?
I think most veterans are more politically aware than the average citizen. I mean, these are people who put their life on the line, so they're tracking it more closely than the average American. You may not be able to talk about it, especially those who are in uniform. Look, I think here's the bottom line, Nicole. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Donald Trump ran by wrapping himself in the American flag. Then he disrespected the American flag. Now the American flag is fighting back in ways outward and inward. The country's guardrails are pushing back. And when you disrespect the flag in this way, and you disrespect the military at this time, and you face off against a Gold Star father whose son did serve, and may have died because of cancer due to an exposure that he got overseas. Biden's talked a little bit about that. He may talk more about it in the days to come. This is the chickens coming home to roost. This is potentially Donald Trump's Waterloo, and I think it is damaging, and it's the biggest veteran story of our time. It's all of the things coming together at once in a time that really hurts him where it hurts most.
And Jeremy Bosch, let me give you the last word. The biggest veteran story of our time, I think Paul Rykoff is onto something there. At the center is John Kelly, whose own son died in combat. In the category of nothing is sacred, Donald Trump has sought to attack him, to suggest that a Marine couldn't handle the heat of his dysfunctional, bleeped up West Wing, which is so far from the truth. You know him. What do you think John Kelly's going through right now?
Nicole, I think this is so personal for the Kelly family that in some ways it's beyond politics. But I think with respect to every Gold Star family, every family that has lost a loved one in battle, they have to be wondering to themselves, what did my child sacrifice if the commander-in-chief, the commander of the troops, is openly attacking them? And of course, I think they know deep down that it's character, that it's patriotism, that's duty to something higher than themselves that caused that loved one to go into harm's way. But when the commander-in-chief acts this low and goes this low, it's a shameful, painful moment for our democracy.
Paul Rykoff, Jeremy Bash, thank you both so much for starting us off today. Jason Johnson is coming back this hour. When we come back, the Trump campaign money machine has quickly